about a year and a half. I have 30 years of railroad experience. But I'm happy to meet you and happy to have the opportunity to come out and meet. We're going to be giving a presentation, so you'll figure out more about what I do during the presentation.
Sure. My name is Beverly County. I'm the Deputy Regional Director. I'm pretty new to this project. I will have been here a year this June. Nice to meet you all.
Rick, can I ask you to go next, and then we'll go around this way. Go ahead.
Okay, Rick Simon, Project Manager for the Bakersfield Palmdale and Palmdale Direct sections of high-speed rail. Been on this about 8 years, so I see a lot of familiar faces here. Good to see you all.
Everyone knows Rick. Roberto, would you mind going into now of the outreach team?
Roberto Rodriguez, Deputy Project Manager and Deputy Manager for the Planning of the Woodlands section, and also for some planning.
Thank you, Roberto.
Right.
I'm Elizabeth Rosenson. I'm on the outreach team, and I've also worked on this project for about 8 or 9 years now.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Fernandez, also with the outreach team.
Everyone, Paulo Lopez, I'm also with the outreach team.
We also have, Serge, I know you can hear us. Yes? Awesome. We also are running the meeting through Zoom for those of you who are here in the room. So Serge can see us on screen, and we can see you, Serge. So go right ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Serge Ganich. I am the Director of the Environmental Services Program for the Authority. I'm located in Sacramento, and I speak on my program for environmental. I've been in this role since November 2020, but I've been involved with the program since September 2015 in various capacities. So previously, I was so now I'm the Authority.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Serge. We appreciate it. Okay, so maybe can I ask this side of the room to begin introducing themselves from, go ahead.
My name is Sandy Madsen, and I am a community member here in Acton. I have been involved in this project with Calvin Pam and the other people leading it quite a long time.
And I am Pam Walter, a member of the Acton Town Council, and been dealing with the high-speed rail folks for 10 years or so. I think it's 10 years, but yes, and it's good to see all of you. Thank you.
Tom Costin, Acton Town Council, since about 2014 maybe.
Tracy Costin, I'm with the Acton Agua newspaper.
I'm Chuck Bostwick. I'm with Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Barger's Lancaster office.
Good afternoon. I'm Jackie Owens. I'm with the office of Congressman Mike Garcia. I'm in the Palmdale office.
Good afternoon. Carlo Basile. I'm a field representative for Assemblyman Tom Acton.
I'm Jackie Ayre with the Acton Town Council.
And I am Mary Johnson with the Agua Dulce Town Council.
And I am Don Henry with the Agua Dulce Town Council.
Chris Udall with the Agua Dulce Town Council.
And Brandon Roque from Senator Scott Hope's office.
Laura, if I was looking, can I ask you to introduce yourselves? Okay. I think I was focused on Serge. Okay, so we're ready to go. So we have a PowerPoint and a video to walk you through to just reorient everyone, make sure you understand the big picture and the pictures specifically here in the Acton-Alalusa area. And for that, I'll have Madonna get started with our presentation. And we'll run through our slides, and then I'll turn it over to Rick, who will go with, I usually say San Francisco, I think Los Angeles first. With San Francisco to Los Angeles, Anaheim. And we're specifically to do that in a trip time of 2 hours and 40 minutes. So we will be designing most of this alignment in phase 1. We've identified phase 1 here in blue. That will be at about 200 miles per hour to make that trip time in 2 hours and 40 minutes. We're limited on the number of stations that we can put in because we really, for ridership purposes, wanted to hone in on a pretty fast travel time. So the stations are shown here on the map with the dots, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the Southern California project sections as we go. Next slide. We are under construction in the Central Valley now. We're on 119 miles from just north of Bakersfield to Madera. And that is under construction, and it has been our focus. We really want to get a section operating and show Californians that it works. So we are excited about the progress we're making in the Central Valley. So this map shows that in yellow. And then we've done a lot of work on environmental clearance, and we're really hoping to get our environmental clearance, most of it done, actually most of it will be done this year, with the exception of 2 Southern California project sections. So you can see the red hashed marks are where we've finished our environmental clearance. We have 2 more project sections in the north that will be finished this year, and then we'll just have 2 project sections in the south to finalize for environmental purposes. Next slide. I like this map. It shows a connection to Brightline West. Brightline is shown here in green. Oops, can you go to the next? There we go. We're actually divided into 3 regions. So Beverly and I are over the Southern California region. So we're directors for the Southern California region, which is Bakersfield to Anaheim. And we divided that for environmental study purposes into 4 different sections. Bakersfield to Palmdale, Palmdale, Burbank, Burbank, Los Angeles to Anaheim. And so I'll talk a little bit about where we're at on most of those sections, but obviously I know you guys want to focus in on the Palmdale to Burbank section. But I kind of want to give you the overview of how it fits together. And then on this map in green is shown Brightline West, who's a private sector high-speed rail provider. And they're hoping to start construction on their Victorville to Las Vegas route this year, and they would connect to us in Palmdale and or possibly to our phase 2 shown here in yellow in Rancho Cucamonga. So it's an exciting opportunity to connect to a private sector rail provider as well. Next one. Since we're in construction in Central Valley, we've created over 7,000 construction jobs. We have an active, a very aggressive, actually, small business engagement program. We've engaged over 650, I think that number's higher now, but over 650 small businesses doing a number of different works. And we really try to focus in on disadvantaged business enterprises as well as disabled veteran enterprises. And we are committed to 100% renewable electric. So our system, as planned, will be electric, and we're identifying renewable energy to feed into and fuel our system. Next slide. Even though our focus for investment is in the Central Valley, we are also investing in what we refer to as the bookends. In Northern California, there's a project that we're working with Caltrain to electrify their existing operation. In Southern California, this is a summary of the projects that we're working on. Link US is actually improvements to Union Station. If you've ever taken a train into Union Station, you know they're dead-end tracks. And it's really pretty inefficient because the track you come in on, that occupies that track dollars to improvements at Union Station. A lot of the environmental work we're doing is in shared corridors, so particularly from Burbank to Anaheim, we will be operating in corridors that are utilized by other passenger operators. We committed $77 million for a safety improvement, a grade separation. It is the highest incident. It has been the highest incident. It's a T intersection with a railroad track going diagonally through it, and there have been a lot of collisions there. So we're advancing that faster, putting $77 million into that, and we should be breaking ground on that soon. It's getting very close. And then connectivity projects, we've put some funds into the Southern California area to help connectivity. Let's go to the next slide. She's trying. I saw her push the button and they're probably skipping through it. I'd like to review a little bit of the funding because a lot of people ask, well, where's your funding coming from? The majority of our funding was in Proposition 1A, which the voters chose to set aside $9.1 billion for high-speed rail. Only about half of that has been appropriated by the legislature, and that's what has been used primarily to focus on that Central Valley construction as well as some of the environmental work we're doing. We're hoping, we're in discussions right now with the legislature on the remaining $4.2 billion. And again, we want to focus on finishing something, but that would also give us some flexibility to start engineering and design in the next stages for the other sections. We get 25% of the revenues of cap and trade. It's part of a fuel tax, actually, that gets set aside for greenhouse gas reductions. And that is part of the annual proceeds. That will sunset in 2030. And then we've gotten 2 federal grants, one from what we refer to as Hsr, which has pretty much helped finalize all of our environmental work, as well as an FY10 grant of about $1 billion, $929 million, which they actually wanted us to start construction on the Central Valley. So that was really what got us started on construction on the Central Valley. This is not an eye exam. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but what I like to refer to this. It came out in our 2020 business plan. And so if you do want to do a deeper dive into our stages and our plan, it's in our business plan. But because we got some funding to start construction in the Central Valley a little bit early, we kind of got out of sync. And we thought we could acquire property and relocate utilities at the same time that we were beginning construction, and it kind of got us out of sync. And so we have gotten some criticism about that. So when our 2020 business plan came out, we put what we refer to as the staged project delivery process in place. Right now we are in stage 2 for this project section in this area. Those sections that have environmental clearance have just moved into the tip of stage 3. So that's kind of where we are in the process. And then we start advancing engineering and design, right-of-way, honing in really on right-of-way and what we need. And throughout the process, we engage with stakeholders. Hello, welcome.
Don's going to ask one spot.
Welcome. So the next slide, I think, takes you through just really quickly. Bakersfield to Palmdale, I mentioned, was environmentally cleared last August. So this kind of shows you the alignment. It's an 80-mile section connecting Bakersfield Station to the Palmdale Transportation Center. I think that's good. We'll go to the next one. We also just finished the Burbank to Los Angeles project section in January of this year. It shows the purple, the hot pink color at the top, shows an underground station connecting to the new Burbank station. And then the green is predominantly existing right-of-way that's used by Measurely. So we finished that environmental document in January, and the record of decision was signed, I think, March 7th, something like that. So those 2 are done in Southern California in this region, and I think the next slide turns it over to Rick to talk about the specific.
The airport, so that's not where the existing terminal is, but it's where the new terminal is going to be. The train station will be right next to the new airport terminal. We'll be able to walk between the 2 to provide that interconnectivity. And then Metrolink also serves that airport as well. So we're trying to make our stations as multimodal as we can so people can transfer between modes and give us a more comprehensive transportation system. These are the alignments that we have in our draft environmental document right now, which we are hoping to get out soon. We have 3 original alternatives, the SR14, which is the westernmost of the 3 that you see here, and then E1 and E2 are the more eastern alignments that are on here. Again, our color coding is purple, it's tunneling. You can see there's an awful lot of tunnels in this section trying to get through the San Diego Mountains. So we had the 3 original alternatives. Back in 2020, we looked at an option to go around Luna Lake. The original alternatives follow the railroad corridor through Palmdale and go south, basically points right at Luna Lake. So our original alignments were directly impacting Luna Lake. We thought we could mitigate that, but I think our conversations with the Corps of Engineers, that wasn't going to be feasible. So we developed a new option to go around Luna Lake, and then we reconnected that to the 3 original alignments that we had. We called the alignments around Luna Lake our A alternatives. We now have an SR14A alternative, an E1A alternative, and an E2A alternative. Because it's a total of 6 end-to-end alignments that will be presented in the environmental document. We have previously selected the original SR14 alignment as our preferred alternative back in 2018. When we added the A alternatives, we amended that preferred alternative to now be the SR 14A option. So it goes around in the lake, it goes back onto the SR 14 as we go south through the mountains and into Burbank. I should point out that coming around in the lake, you cannot see it on this map, it forced us to swing farther south as we come through Acton. And the way the topography worked and the geometry and everything that we needed to do, it was best to just keep it underground as we come through Acton. So while the original SR 14A had some, original SR 14 had some above ground sections in Acton, and I would also say this new SR 14A is all underground going through Acton.
Rick, would you mind if I interrupt, just to make sure that you guys are following along on the map on the fact sheet? And if you don't mind, if we just work this, making sure you guys know which alignment Rick was just talking about as the preferred alternative. So it's this alignment here, where it says preferred alternative, that we want to make sure you're noticing. And it goes all the way down to Burbank. So the adjustment or the refinement that the authority did in 2020 is this here, preferred alternative SR 14A. Just want to make sure you can see that, make sure you kind of have that in your head on the map.
Yeah, green says surface.
Yeah. Are you talking about this?
No, come down further south.
Here?
On the alignment you just showed us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got two spots. Yeah.
Is it touch? Oh, sorry.
Wow.
Are you talking about this here?
Further down towards Burbank, right there. Is that actually out Wilson?
That's out Wilson Canyon Road.
Okay, we're glad that's.
And I think you have some close-ups, and then the video will also walk us through.
We have a video later that makes
through
it a
this.
little more detail.
But good point, yes, the green refers to at grade, and the blue refers to an aerial alignment, so there is some of that activity there. Okay.
When you say tunneling, how deep are you going to be going?
So that really depends on the surface topography. We have hills up and down, and our alignment is straight through that. So if we're going under a hill, it's much deeper. We have to be at least 100 feet below ground at a minimum. So we're ranging from 100 feet down. As we go through the mountains, we're actually more than 2,000 feet deep in some areas. These mountains are pretty tall.
Let's keep going. I know I interrupted there. Make sure we get through it all and then have plenty of time for questions. The next slide.
Next slide. So this focuses in a little more on the Acton area, and I would also say, and there is one thing I'd like to point out, is full disclosure. While the alignment removes mooring machines, that will enable us to build the project quicker and cheaper. There is then a temporary impact at that site to do that construction work. But when we're finished, we fill it all back in, and it becomes back to the way it was at the beginning. So long-term permanent, the alignment is underground. We have this construction access point here that we propose as part of the project. So there would be some temporary impacts there during Crown Valley Road.
What exactly is that location? So it's kind of hard to tell exactly where that is.
It's on the west side of Crown Valley, about 500 feet or so to the west, just south of the freeway. It's vacant land today. So it'll be right off the freeway and west of.
Okay. Vacant land.
Is it next to the school?
Across the street from the, right?
Across the street from the middle school.
Halfway between the middle school and the high school.
Oh, okay.
Right, kind of halfway, that's good distance away.
And right now it's covered with greenery, right? It's not a bare lot.
Well, junipers and stuff.
Junipers, yeah. Just for visual reference, you know.
Yeah.
Somebody's talking about digging a hole, I'm thinking, man, if you start with an open land.
So that's on Cedral, right?
Between Cecil and Oaklands.
Right. Between Cedar and Bridge.
Right.
So some of the reasons we are going with SR 14A as our recommended preferred alternative at this point is the lowest risk that we have tunneling, going through the mountains or crossing the mountains reduces our risk of running into groundwater at very high pressure as we go through the mountains. We're also, as we mentioned, avoiding impacts, direct impacts in the lake, and also we are now underground when we cross the Pacific Crest Trail near that Pacific Crest Trail.
Okay.
Next slide. E1 and E2 is the same slide. So the E1 and E2 also, this was a much smaller change with the E1 and E2 by swinging around in the lake. Substation to the south, it's unchanged. The E1 and E1A are the same. E2 and E2A are the same. Just a slight variation going around the lake. Next slide. And then coming down into Burbank, we still really have our three original alternatives. The changes made when we added the A alternatives all occurred north of the National Forest. So everything going through the National Forest and then coming down into Burbank is unchanged. So still the three alternatives that we had, which you see here. Again, a lot of tunneling coming down into the valley with the preferred alternative, which is the one to the west, the SF14A. We do come back to the surface near spreading grounds below Hanson Dam. We come into the Metrolink corridor, we run alongside Metrolink and go under I-5 and then go back underground again to the airport station. Our station at the airport has to be below grade because of the runways, staying out of the flight path and all that. So at grade as we come through Sun Valley right alongside Metrolink, back underground at the airport. Okay, next slide. So again, close to Burbank, you can see then where our station is located, the yellow rectangle box there. Again, the existing airport terminal is in the southeast quadrant of the runways. The new terminal is being planned in the northeast quadrant, so we're finding it right next to that. Yeah, and that's from the Burbank station south has been cleared. Burbank to Los Angeles side cleared earlier this year. That's environmental.
Oh, that's fast. Can you talk that fast?
We're starting in Palmdale. We're looking south. So green is the high-speed rail alignment. The orange is the connection to the Right Line project in Las Vegas.
Thank you.
So trains from Las Vegas are coming in from the east to the west. If you go north or south, the trains going to Los Angeles would curve south and come into the Palmdale station. And then Metrolink will also be there. The Palmdale Transportation Center there. That will be our new train station just south of the existing Metrolink station. And all the trains will come in there to interface with each other. Our alignment is green. We're at grade. We're running right next to the existing railroad on the west side of the Eastern Union Pacific, coming all the way through Palmdale.
It's zooming in a little bit, and I think it will continue.
So we're continuing paralleling the existing rail corridor, but as we come out of Palmdale to the south, you'll see we had to start to swing over to go around Luna Lake, which is a small lake in front of the dam in Palmdale. So we had our original line went through Luna Lake, but now we're going around. You can see we swing out to the east a little bit and then back. We have a bridge. The blue is a structure. We're bridging over the aqueduct and the Metrolink and Sierra Highway all at once with one structure. Going over the top of all of that. And climbing up into the hills. So where we transition into purple is where our tunnel corridor will be. Basically just next to the Fair Blossom interchange on 14. And then in the tunnel here is where we're in purple. And generally following the 14, but the topography, these hills that are here, just enable us to stay underground here. We swing around and have this straight section generally south of the freeway. You see a little piece in orange. That's that construction window that I talked about. Temporary construction window. This west of Crown Valley, as you can see, it's between Cedral and the freeway. West of Crown Valley, to the high school at the top there. That's our temporary construction window. We also have one of these down in Silmar that we'll see later in the video. So it's going. And the alignment is staying underground with the purple. Very little faster than this.
Someone asked that.
Is the train going near the high school?
So
It's underground here.
generally in tunnel.
So, yes, right.
It's underground near the high school?
Yeah, there's the high school right there. Yeah.
Be able to go from Palmdale to Burbank in about 15 minutes. Coming through the foothills and mountains, again, staying along the tunnel, generally close to the freeway, parallel the freeway, but we're trying to be straighter than the freeway, go faster. We go past the west of trucks, staying underground. Here's the part that comes back above ground, go over Untitled Canyon Road. Blue and green there are above ground sections, back into another short tunnel, and then we come out.
Isn't that where that new development
Last at-grade above ground section with another bridge. It will span the Santa Clara River as well as Metrolink and Soledad Canyon Road. Before we dive into our tunnel portal going through the forest, you notice that this tunnel portal is at the site where the Vulcan mine is right now. So the plan is to use that area as a construction portal to build the tunnels. And when we're done, we use the tunnel spoils to landscape back over the top of that, restore that area to natural condition.
Is that blue on a berm or on stanchions?
Blue is a bridge.
A bridge.
Over the river. Now we're back in tunnel to go through the national forest, swing around the wilderness area that is to the left of the picture here, and skirting the edge of Santa Clarita. You see we're crossing the mountain range, and where it's much narrower and not quite as tall. We end up with two long tunnels on this. One is 12 miles long and one is 13. This one continues south, coming into Silmar. Starting to clean up some residential areas, but we're again staying underground. Purple denotes. We get to the freeway interchange, the 210 and the 118. You'll see this orange sections again. You see another temporary construction window. Right where the freeways meet. You see two orange sections. Those are two alternatives for the window at this point, but we're only going to build one of them. So we have two options that are shown there with the two orange sections, one on each side of the 210. Continuing underground, we come through Appointment area, and then we surface here. We have a tunnel portal, which is near Montague Street area, and then we transition up to the surface. The green is where we're up near the surface. We're going over the spreading grounds. As you see there, we have a small bridge in blue that goes over the underwash channel, and then we're running alongside Metrolink, joining the Metrolink corridor there at Sheldon Street, and continuing south. We're at ground level right next to Metrolink. So there's two tracks, one or two tracks there today. We'll have four. The rail corridor circle open system.
Is that near the Hanson Dam?
Ground level here, continuing along. As soon as we go under the I-5 freeway here, then we transition back to go underground again. The red is like a trench transitioning down to underground. The orange is like a cover, so yes, we excavate, but then when we're done, we fill it back over. And then the purple is fully underground, and coming in through the Burbank Airport Station. You see, we're going past the north-south runway. We have to be underground with the runways, and then coming into our Burbank Station. And you see the Burbank to Los Angeles alignment continues to the south, the white line, that's what's already been cleared. Environmentally clear the last piece. So that is our video. As I said, we have these online. There's an online version of this has a narration built into it. So we'll leave you to watch.
He's a star.
And you can, but you can pause it and, take this one and look at it and pause it.
About now. And it's been held up probably to the end of May, maybe to the end of June. We will get back to you when we have a firm date. It's about done, but for reasons I won't go into, we're going back and making one little bits. So the draft release will be coming up soon. We are planning to do our public hearings virtually, but we understand that you all have challenges sometimes with internet connections here. So
Why virtually?
We're probably going to do an in-person meeting for the public, and then let them know how to submit comments. We won't be taking comments formally, but we would make sure that everybody knows how to submit comments when we come to that meeting. So we will be in touch with a specific release date. I think we're aiming to about a 60-day comment period. Since I don't have the schedule, I can't be specifically sure. But it'll be about 60 days, 45 is the minimum. But we like to give a little extra time. And Serge, do you want to comment any more on that? Serge is our Director of Environmental Services, knows all things environmental documents, so he may want to come up to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ladonna. I don't know if I have more to comment. So we'll prepare the CEQA, and then the authority has also been delegated NEPA assignment from the FRA. So the California Rail Authority is both the state and federal lead. We're preparing a joint EIR-EIS. And as Ladonna said, we're planning for a 60-day public comment questions.
The last slide is just kind of a summary of where we're at in the environmental process. We mentioned that we finished the two that are surrounding this. And then this is how to find our environmental document when it's released. We will make sure that you have
with environmental documents. They're voluminous. There are 3 volumes to this particular document, and we'll have a full hard copy set here. And then I'll follow up with the town councils to make sure that you also have a USB of the files if you want to download it to your computer and click through it that way. Of course, it'll be available online, but these are very large files, so we just want to make it available to you. Hard copy, electronic copy, or online.
And the hard copy will be here at this library?
At this library, yes. Yeah. And then we'll have a list of all the other local repositories as well, so they're dotted throughout the corridor so that people can go in person if they want to look at the document that way.
So comments will be taken by mail through our, through our website, also by email, and there will be, like I said, we're doing a virtual comment. If somebody wants to testify orally, they can do that as well at the virtual meeting that we set up. So there will be a number of different ways to submit comments. And then I think the last page is, I think there's one more. Just we do have a Palmdale to Burbank website that is very similar to the fact sheet. It's going to have a lot of the information that's on the fact sheet. And you can follow us if you haven't already. It's these little yellow dots on the back page. Palmdale_Burbank@ca.gov. That's a great way to follow us and make sure that you get any announcements. Yeah, and that's just kind of a repeat of how to stay in touch with us.
For those of you who have been with us for some time, the contact information is the same, the phone number is the same, the email address is the same. And as we get closer to the release date, we'll be in touch to make sure you know when that occurs, when the stuff is available. And then, as LaDonna mentioned, we will be holding meetings virtually, as well as a couple of informal meetings. We call them open houses. Many of you have attended those in the past, and that will just be to help you understand the document, beginning to end, And then we'll definitely want to encourage the town council and you all individually to make comments on the document. We'll make it really clear when the end date for the public comment period is, because it needs to be a very defined period of time so that the authority knows and make sure that everyone can have an opportunity to comment and to make sure to respond to those comments, which is the next step after this. So let us stop there, LaDonna, I think, and open it up to the floor and make sure if you have any questions or comments, let's go ahead and do that.
I have a question. I just want to make sure. So any comments that the community has to go in by a certain date. The date of the hearing, you won't be hearing from people, right? We can't call that day and speak that day, correctly? Correct?
No.
Oh, you can?
For the public hearing.
Well, we're confusing terms.
Okay, yeah, I'm confused.
And I'll go.
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
So that's the entire point of the public hearing, which is a very formal public meeting, is to hear from the public.
Okay.
So it's a 5-hour period of time on a very specific day. We'll make sure that you all know so that the public can speak orally, and those comments would be officially heard and received by the authority. That's one virtual.
Okay.
A virtual meeting, yes, that's right. And that will be one way for you all to receive or to provide formal comments. We also receive it by email. We will also receive it by the telephone hotline number, by traditional mail, and on the website. And on the website.
But the day of the hearing, if we were to make a comment, it's not a back and forth. You're just hearing our comments. So, so if we wanted answers to specific questions, we should get that to you first so that maybe those will be addressed. Will that happen? Like if we have questions on something specific and we could get it to you before the hearing, can that be addressed before the hearing so that we know that our questions were actually heard? I'm not questioning anyone's integrity. I'm just saying so that we know that our questions are being heard. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do know what you mean. So let's break down the process. So there's going to be a draft environmental document, which the entire point of the draft document is to present what the project is to the public. The authority has been creating this draft document with public input over years. So now we have arrived to the point where everything is documented just as they presented here today at a very high level, but in detail in the draft document. The public hearing and the public comment period is not a dialogue for us to get comments back that will be responded to in that moment. The first step is the draft. The second step is what's called the final. And in the final, and Jackie, I know you understand what I'm talking about, many of you have been through this process before. In the final, which may be a year after the draft document is released, is where all the comments will be responded to directly. So it's a very formal, paced process where the public needs to tell the authority what you think about the project. And then the authority needs to, in detail, respond. And that does not happen within the same public hearing. So the first step is for you to comment. The next step is for the authority to respond. And it happens over time.
Okay.
Did I explain that?
Thank you.
I think that maybe one of the things Tracy's also getting at is in the past, you've done workshops and then had the hearing.
Yes.
So that, and in this, I think in this instance, something like that format is very important because this is a new alternative. The other alternatives we've known and had lots of dialogue and lots of questions and answers with Rick and his team and you and everybody else. But this is all brand new and it is your preferred alternative. So I guess I just want to convey that there is a high likelihood that people will want to have questions. I've got some questions, just for today, but I'm not the only person who might have questions.
No, of course.
So if you could arrange to have like a workshop, a real workshop, and then where you just record the comments.
So let us clarify. So once the draft document is released, the first step for the authority to do is to make sure the public knows that it's released and then to explain it. So we will be holding open houses is what we call them, which is the workshop that you're talking about. Except in this case, it will be just to answer questions
of what's in the document. The document won't change in that moment with your questions or comments, but we will be clarifying what's in there. So the open house is the opportunity for you all to ask the questions and for the authority to say, oh, it's on page 432, let's look at this map together. That's what the open houses will be for. Those will be virtual, and we are coordinating additional meetings to be in person given the whole situation. We very much would like to do that here in Acton, especially because of the limitation with the whole internet. So the open houses will occur first before the public hearing. And in those moments is where we want to just walk you through the document. The comments and the dialogue that we have at the open houses will not be formal. It's just meant for, let's just pull up our sleeves, open up the document. We very well might have a meeting here in this room where we do that. And you can come in anytime and talk to the team about, okay, where is the noise section? What are the decibel levels? What are you talking about? And then that will be the time to do that. Do I have that right?
Yeah, the only thing I want to clarify is that there will be a specific time to provide your testimony. If we come out in a workshop and we're talking with you one-on-one and you ask a question and we say something, that's not an official comment.
Yeah.
That's just us answering your questions and trying to make sure that you understand the process.
Yeah.
So it's one of the reasons that we wanted to get a little jump start, to let you know that it's really on the forefront. You spent a lot of time in route development, refining the route development, doing initial engineering, selecting the preferred alternative. You've been here. Once our draft is released, which fingers crossed, late May, June, there will be that's when the time clock starts. And we will make sure that you know when that time clock starts for the 60-day comment period. And like Ken says, there will be an official time to share comments by video. And we plan to have an open house come just kind of talk to you to make sure that you know what's going on. But that won't be the official comment. Does that help? I know it's kind of confusing. You're a little different because I understand you have virtual challenges, and we wanted to make sure that we're coming out here and doing this in person. And we didn't know COVID, if we could or if we couldn't, and that was on and off. So our plan was all the official stuff is virtual, but we will do everything that we can to interact with the community, providing COVID stays where it is right now. We'll be back.
Yes, I just have a question about the language. So the alignments are always referred to as alternatives. So every line on the map is an alternative. But you have a preferred alternative. Is that what the EIR is going to be based around? So my question becomes, what causes the preferred alternative to be changed possibly to something else, to one of these other lines? Does that make sense? Because if we have a preferred alternative, and that's the one we just watched the video, correct?
That's right.
And then there's the one above it, which was the previous, I think the previous
That's right.
one. Is what, at this point in the process, what could cause a change in the preferred alternative, if anything?
You want to go
Want me
ahead?
to take that?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the secret actually.
So I'll take a step back just to provide a little bit of context. The EIR-EIS process for many years followed a process where at the draft we identified all of the alternatives under consideration and then didn't make a selection until we had received public comment, considered it, and then prepared the final EIR-EIS and selected the preferred alternative at that point and sought approval for it. Around 2015, some of the regulations changed at the federal level, advancing this idea to identify a preferred alternative. And it would allow some streamlining on the back end. And what it really helped for decision making, and particularly public participation, is just more transparency. Because sometimes an agency will identify a superior alternative as they're working through it. And it also helps to focus public participation on that preferred alternative. So the authority started working on that process, and we went to our board in November of 2018 to identify a preferred alternative. At the time, it was the Refine SR 14. Through subsequent work, we working with the Army Corps and other agencies identified this Refine SR 14. So So that is our preferred alternative. To answer your question, what might change it? If through the circulation of the environmental document, a new impact was identified that caused us to reconsider in the preferred alternative was truly environmentally superior and had the best balance of impacts, design considerations, cost profile, etc., we may reconsider it at this point. But the basis for our preferred alternative is the optimal alternative to minimize effects to the natural environment. And so at this point, we don't anticipate that our preferred alternative would change. But we do have to be open to the possibility that through public comments, a stakeholder, another entity, or new information may come to light. And so we don't base our decision, or we don't make our decision until we take the totality of public comment on the document. And hopefully it reasserts or reaffirms our assessment that the preferred alternative is indeed the environmentally superior alternative, and that's something we seek approval by our work. So I won't say it's impossible that the preferred alternative would change, but we're doing everything that we can to be transparent, to disclose our considerations to the public, and welcome input on the two alternatives that we're considering before we make the final decision.
Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
it does. Thank you.
Okay, and then, Serge, if I'm not mistaken, just to clarify, all 6 alternatives will be evaluated in the document equally. Is that correct? Yes. So you'll see them all in there, and there's a video for each one of them.
Okay.
So they're all being considered equally, so full disclosure for the public, you can weigh in on any one of them or all of them. But the authority, in the spirit of full transparency, is telling you this is their preferred.
Okay.
One question, Serge just mentioned that the refined SR14 is the preferred alternative. And yet the little box here is saying that the preferred alternative doesn't say refined underneath it.
So if we can clarify that, go ahead. It is the second one from the top.
It's SR14A.
SR14A.
Fine, SR14 was the previous.
So why doesn't he call that the referred, the refined
They
SR?
updated the names and dropped the refined.
We had an original SR14 that was even different.
Yes.
I get about 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
We refined it to become the refined SR14. And then we added A.
That's a little confusing when someone says that the refined SR14 is the preferred alternative, and yet here in this little box it doesn't say that.
It was the preferred alternative.
Was. It's
From
not
2018 to
Was. Okay. But Serge just said that it is, and in order to get that changed would be very difficult. So I just want to make clear that this little box has value to it, where everything in Acton is going underground, to differentiate that from what's classified here as the refined SR14.
So we can cross out the refined? I mean,
One of the 6 will be in the environmental document.
but you prefer it to the one box. Okay, well, that is great.
How about highlight the SR14A, because all 6 of them are still being.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yes.
So if speed is the whole idea here, why aren't you taking the shortest route?
Good question.
Right, the shortest would be from the
E2 or E2A?
And one of the challenges with that, you see, it kind of crosses the mountain range at kind of a diagonal, kind of an angle. And where it's crossing the mountain range and the surface, there's a potential that there could be table water 2,000 feet high, which means if we post into that, it would be very high pressure.
Which brings me on to another point. If you're going through Acton, and you're 100 feet below the Acton Agricultural groundwater basin, what consideration given to protecting that? Because if you go back to the 1800s, there was a point where Acton or Sacramento was going to be chosen as the state capital, and as my understanding of it is, there was a flowing river, the Santa Clara River, running through Acton at the time, and that water has just gone underground. So what are you doing to preserve that groundwater base?
So one of the things that we're going to add to this is that technology is such that we can tunnel and make these tunnels watertight. It's close to the surface, or just water people.
Consider 100 feet deep. When the final route goes, consider 100 feet deep, like average 100, 400. But also, we are talking about natural. The technology is available to allow the tunnel not to drain the water from the aquifers that is covered. Okay, so there might be some seepage in the construction, but then everything is sealed off, and there is a minimal amount of water that gets into the tunnel. And there is no effects to the aquifers. The problem is when, as Rick was saying, when the depths start to get into the thousands of feet, the pressure that you get at the level of the tunnel is like a submarine going down into the ocean. You know, it gets higher and higher, and the technology that we have to make those tunnels watertight as possible is in the limit. The E2 in particular, we have done some boreholes in the mountains to investigate what are the water levels through this area, and we have found that the risk of having very high water pressures and therefore to not be able to overcome those them and are very high. So the risk of not having of draining some aquifers is very high, or higher than acceptable. And that's why these alternatives have not been selected. E1 actually was one alignment that we tried to have optimized.
Water going with the tunnel, correct, for fire suppression and such? Like you're going to need electricity, you're going to need communications. Will there be water lines running with the tunnel?
There could be. We haven't really identified that yet. Fire suppression probably have a little bit.
So usually, for construction of the tunnel, there is water supply that the tunnel work machine needs in order to operate. Usually, it's a closed water circuit that needs some, of course, need to add water because you lose some water to the operation. But the intention is to have a closed water cycle. For water suppression during operation, there is usually no water running through the tunnel. There are pipes out there in order to be used by the fire services in case it is needed at some time. But there are no, usually for this type of tunnels, I mean, automatic suppression systems like in buildings. There are empty pipes that can be used to plug in fire cars or fire trains. That is something to be defined in the future. But
So it'd be similar like a standpipe in a building?
Yes.
So it would be there, but it would only be charged in case it was
charged. It won't have water. There won't be any water running at the time during the operation.
Okay. Thank you.
Jackie. No, Sandy will go first. No, Sandy, and then we'll go to Jackie. Go ahead.
Just a quick clarification on the schedule, because when the EIR is released, then there's a 60-day comment period. You would, I assume, but I'm asking, you would have that open house, that question answered pretty soon after?
Yes.
So that we have that information and then we can proceed to gather our comments?
Exactly. There's a kind of a recommended schedule or sequence. The public hearing will always be closer to the end date, last week or two of the 60-day period, so that the early part of the comment period, we have more time to just make sure that people know it's out. We have our open house meeting. We have time to meet with you. So yes. Jackie.
No, up to you.
So this is just me speaking personally, not on behalf of the Acton Town Council or the community. I prefer the 14A route. However, it's completely unknown to us. We are very familiar with all the other routes, and you've heard from us on a number of issues involved in those. And to the extent that the preferred alternative may shift from 14A if some unanticipated or unidentified impact comes up, I believe it's in the best interest of High-Speed Rail Authority and our community that you be aware of all the potential impacts of 14A, since we've never given you any. We've never spoken to you about them. So I would like to articulate a few of them now, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. I just want to clarify, we did host a public virtual meeting in October of 2020 where we presented this SR 14A alternative.
Yeah, except for people didn't have, they heard about it and they didn't have time to formulate comments in that time frame.
I just wanted to clarify, it's been out there for a little while. It's not new in that sense.
Not new
It's been out
today.
for a little while.
Okay, but not the details like we're seeing, like where exactly where we have the train route and everything. But at any rate, so that intersection, Antelope Woods and Crown Valley, I'll go out on a limb and say, at least in my opinion, it's the most sensitive intersection in our community. That's where the middle school is. That's where a lot of cars come off the freeway, come on the freeway. It's where a lot of commuters cut through to avoid freeway traffic on the Sierra Highway or all the way down to Soledad. It's the most trafficked, and to include in your draft DIR mitigation measures to address that incredibly sensitive intersection and impacts of it, pedestrian, equestrian, and vehicle impacts. And please be sensitive to this community's general plan and rural protection provisions that would perhaps limit some of the mitigation measures you might contemplate, such as traffic signals. So those are extremely prohibited, not prohibited, extremely discouraged in our community.
Did you say such as traffic signals?
That is correct. I don't mean, like red, green, blue. So red flashing warning lights, that's not what I'm talking about, but, like stop lights and other urban infrastructure. So that's one thing that it is a potential impact that could be brought up in public comment that might cause you to shift away from this alternative. So please contemplate mitigation measures and incorporate them in your draft DIR so that that problem is not, it's manageable. The second issue is, and I don't know if you can get the picture of showing where that one, your hatch area is. Anyway, is it
Which area?
Where you're putting the hatch in between Cedral and the freeway?
On the video?
Is it possible? Because I wanted to be able to show you something there.
So it's in the video?
It's in the video. Is that too hard to do? Yeah, but that would be a great thing. Anything like that would be awesome. Because freeways typically are often have slow-moving trucks coming on, slow-moving trucks coming off.
And it's a state highway. It's not a...
14, yeah, but I agree.
Okay, so just having trouble hearing you. So,
mine not speaking
maybe
loud.
we use
There you go.
the microphone?
Okay.
Right there.
So if you don't mind, we're going to use the microphone so that Serge can hear the comments, but you
want me to
don't have to
repeat
repeat
what I
anything,
said?
just keep it going.
Okay, thank you very much. Is this on? Hello, I have bad computer juju. Is this working? Okay.
Yes. So hopefully that helps you, Serge.
So, and that, it was blown up a second ago, but that particular area is a major drainage area, and there are several pipes under the freeway that bring high velocity, large volumes of water. It's probably maybe a 15 to 20 square mile area that drains right through that section. And all the homes downstream of it are designed and constructed based on hydrology and hydraulic studies that assume the flow, is where it is now and at the volume and rate it is now. So the construction that you do needs to either not disturb that, or another opportunity is, and we actually discussed, or I raised it as a possibility on the Measure W project, is to team up with the county to do basically I wish Mary were here, because she's on the WASP, a groundwater detention retention system for re-entraining groundwater back into the ground, into the water table, and therefore significantly reduce that flow. But it's critical, because I know people who live in those houses there, that whatever is done on that property, while it might appear vacant, it is configured in a way that that all the downstream homes are designed to accommodate it. And if you shift that in any way, the homes between that location and all the way down to downtown Acton could be washed out. So somehow you need to, and if you would like, I'm more than happy to meet with anybody, and well, maybe my husband will, my hip isn't doing too well, but hike you through and show you where all the storm drains are and everything in that area. So I'm a little selfish here. I don't want the alternative 14A to be derailed for any reason, but those are two big things that have to be addressed. I also want to point out that the middle school, I don't know, I can't see it on this one, but the middle school is right there. And parents come in every day at 7:20, and sometimes they wait 4 or 5 minutes to get in and out of the school. So it's an incredibly sensitive area. Everybody uses that intersection, but at certain times of the day in particular. And children, now that at that middle school, now there's 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th grade as we go there. And the younger they are, the less aware they are of their surroundings.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm not mistaken, the environmental document in terms of the various mitigation measures that have already been included in it are in place. So the two areas of comments that you just raised are perfect comments. I mean, I can't tell you what the mitigations are that are in the document now, but as you read the document, what you just described, Jackie, I think, as you know, would be excellent comments to, as you assess it and see if they are addressed or not, for you to make those comments, because I think it's exactly those type that the authority needs to hear if impacts are not considered or appropriately mitigated, and those ideas need to come forward. So let's monitor that as the document comes out and make sure that those points are taken.
So is there sufficient information in the draft EIR that one could look at it and be comfortable with the hydrology and hydraulics concerns and not raise it? Or we've not really talked about this particular alternative yet, so.
So,
talk about hydraulics.
yeah, I think that the amount of detail that you're talking about storm drains and that kind of evidence is not treated this way in a document of this level of detail.
Do you want to pass the microphone over? Sorry, Sir Jay, able to hear the dialogue.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that probably I think that the level of detail that you're talking about regarding drainage design and storm drains is not covered like that. It's this level of design. There is of course a hydrology, floodplain, and stormwater management documents that cover these aspects. But I don't think the level of detail of determining what storm drains have been identified, what are the dimensions that we will need to take into account in our project. It covers this from a high level, identifying the main streams, the main creeks, the flows that are that can be calculated, but on a very high level and only with very discrete points. You know what I mean? It's not a very road design that you would have on later stages, not 30%, 60%, or 90% ready for construction. And on later down the road, these studies are done with better data, better topography, better mapping, and taking into the latest configuration of the land. And usually all those aspects are covered, yes. So taking into account all regional and state regulations regarding this matter.
So what, I'll just speak loudly.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
so what is the mechanism then? Because these are real concerns for people who live in that area. What is the mechanism then, if the EIR will come out and probably not, from what I'm hearing, have any sort of mitigations offered for these impacts, because that's more of a 90% design rather than the 10% design. What mechanism will this community have to work with high-speed rail through the 50, 70, 80, 90% design so that we're comfortable that those concerns are addressed if the EIR is too high level at this point to address them?
And it's really part of stage gate and why we talked about stage gate. That bar at the bottom, there's stakeholder input and engagement throughout the process. So as we advance design, we will be checking back with the community. We'll need to pull permits in some situations. I'm very biased. So we will be engaging with the community as we advance design. But he's right, at this point, we may not have all those details still. I welcome your comment, and I hope that you do put it in, and we'll put a pin in that, mark that for something that we want to address later if we can't figure out how to address it between draft and final.
And to that point, I would just add about the construction hours and concerns about specific times of day. And those are things that can be.
Thing here is in the middle of that. That's one of the advantages. We want to be kind of in the middle of that.
So you have two tunneling machines heading towards each other.
Yeah. So 6 miles north of Ground Valley, 6 miles south of Ground Valley. That northern 12-mile tunnel, and the other one is all through the forest.
So that access point that you're talking about at Crown Valley is really where the spoils will exit from the mining operation and then be carried off to somewhere else.
Potentially, some of that will come out there. That's only for the northern tunnel, not the one farther south.
Right, so how many millions of tons of spoil are you going to pull out for that 6 mile stretch, and where's it going to go?
That a number around that.
That is included in the, I mean, you will see those numbers.
Right, because you mentioned that this was temporary. That's an awful lot of mining work, and assuming that you started today, how long is temporary?
So the way these tunnels are built, so the contractor has some flexibility to either start at the ends and drill to the middle, in which case the spoils will out the ends, or you can start in the middle and drill outward, in which case the spoils will come out the middle. And that's, some of that is flexibility that the contractor will have, whatever is the most efficient operation.
So the reason I ask is because one of the things you cannot mitigate in a project like this is construction noise and dust. I mean, it's just one of those things where you get the free passes for the greater good. You know, even though we can't mitigate it, we're going to do it anyway. The reason I'm asking is because you've got two schools very close by. You've got an awful lot of dust that's going to be generated by this removal process. And therefore, I think it's really important for the community to understand who's going to be impacted by this, how long it's going to go on. You know, because you've got two different alternatives here. You could drill one hole in the middle and pull it all out from the middle, or you could go in at two ends and pull it out from both ends. And those would have fairly instrumental impacts on school kids, because that's the two closest things you've got to that exit point there.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, and we encourage you to do those comments. I don't remember exactly the numbers, of course, and as Rick is saying, there is some flexibility for how to construct these tunnels for the contractor. But one of the solutions would be to start actually from the other two ends and come to this point and just extract the ends. Okay, that would be our solution.
We're approaching 5:30-ish, but I want to make sure that we, are there any other comments or questions?
I did have one other question. The last time we had public meetings, a couple of years ago, before we saw this alternative, and I'm asking this question because although you have a preferred alternative, you need to look at all the alternatives. In particular, the above-ground alternatives through Acton, we were very concerned about noise. And in the last discussions we had, again, that was like 2019 maybe so, because we were meeting publicly, the noise analysis that high-speed rail was going to do for those other alternatives assumed a trip rate and ridership numbers that were about 30% less than what the ridership report said that had just come out. And I think it was Francisco, I can't remember the gentleman's name who was working with.
Yeah.
He had said, well, we're not going to use the full build-out numbers, we're just going to use a lower number. And that was very troubling to us because we have to deal with the full build-out because full build-out is what's going to happen. So my question for you is, in this round on the EIR, the draft EIR that's pending, are you guys using that same paradigm where you're not doing the full build-out trip rates for your noise assessments for the other routes in Acton that will be above ground?
My understanding. My understanding is that the noise level should be done the final.
Full build out.
We're matching the ridership for the service model that's shown in our business.
In the 2022 business plan, or the most recent 2022, or is it like?
Probably 2020, I don't know, probably 2018. Yeah, 2018 was the
Oh, I thought you redid those every 2 or 3 years.
The passenger forecast has not been redone recently. We're going to work on it. But the business plan comes out every 2 years, and there is a draft that's out now. I should talk about that. And it'll be closing. But because of COVID, the 2020 business plan was delayed to 2021, so we just did a quick update this time. But if you're talking about passenger count,
well, trip rates basically. It was 96 trips a day.
That has not
round
changed recently.
And the environmental assessment's going to look at full build out, full 96 round trips, rather than 64 or something. It was a lot less than. So it really.
I believe so. I don't.
Okay.
We can follow up with you on that. I can get you a link that shows the operations plan. It is a technical appendix of the 2020 business plan, I believe. But it's 200 pages, and I haven't read it.
Okay, so I'll read it. I have no problem with that.
But I have seen it.
Well, thank you.
So we'll follow up with you. Yes.
Yeah, my question, you notice I don't really need one. My question, it has more to do probably with aesthetics than with anything. We're looking at the equipment coming in, the digging out. It's big, but it's also it gets me thinking how much electrical line construction will be added to this area. You know, lately we've been having added lines, or along the same routes, the power lines come through pretty closely. In fact, you go underneath them. And are you going to be adding power lines and additional electrical power here? Because the train, I mean, to go at the speeds you're talking about, I mean, I saw what the engines are. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You better be carrying a nuclear power plant.
Don't say that.
No, I am kidding, but I mean, it's a lot of power. And I was just wondering, is it added in or is it carrying through the tunnel?
So high-speed rail lines get two, let's say, so two kinds of power, one for traction and another for auxiliary systems, let's say so.
Yeah.
So the traction power, what we call traction power, we usually need to connect to a big existing substation somewhere, or an existing high voltage power line that the power company would allow us to connect. In this case, in this area, we're going to connect in all alternatives to the Benson substation.
Same Benson station?
Yeah.
Yes.
We will be connecting there. But in this case in particular also, we usually use the portal entrances and these shafts to get additional power for auxiliary systems, and also these lines are usually used for the construction because TDMs are electrical. They run on electric power.
Yeah.
So in this case, we are running an additional line for the construction and then the operation of the auxiliary systems to Crown Valley Road from this small substation that actually is here.
Is that another line then, a distribution?
It's gonna be, yeah, it's a medium voltage. I don't recall right now what the voltage is, but I'm gonna it's whatever. That
Oh, the
substation
current lines are
provides
at
20
66.
kilovolt, 90 kilovolt, whatever. Anything like that would work, a distribution line.
And is it going to be above ground?
We are not defining it right now. It could be above or underground.
Okay, well, just so you know.
We are just defining a footprint along the road, send that line, basically.
Well, to the extent that you need to be concerned with compliance or consistency with adopted general plans, our local general plan has those types of lines underground, all future, all new.
Right.
And we, in this area, are hit with PSPS all the time, and Edison's constantly cutting our power. So if you're going to be pulling power from the Acton substation, just know that Acton loses power for as much as 10 to 15 days a year.
So it's shown in the document what our utility plan is for not only the power, but water and things like that. So these are things you can comment on when the document goes out.
Regarding your concern, all the systems are usually redundant, so we will be pulling from the Vincent substation here, but also from San Fernando Valley.
Edison does not understand redundancy.
And usually in the caster area, they should have another feed, so all these sections can overlap. So one section usually can power the Jackson one feed fails. These are usually redundant systems.
So how are you said at the beginning, somebody did, that this is all, you're making arrangements for it all to be renewable power. What are those arrangements? Like, will you be putting a lot of solar panels up in Acton to support the?
That's a program level question.
Yeah, it's somewhat to be determined as to where all the power comes from, because we do have a team that's studying how to make sure that we can get to that renewable goal, and it may be a combination of having to add on solar, in which case we would have to permit that separately, or study impacts from that separately. Battery storage they're looking at, but some of the exact where it's coming from is still to be determined. They've outlined the power needs and some options. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for the moment?
You guys cover the whole up. The community would like an aquatic center to cover it.
Duly noted.
He's kidding. Just joking.
We'd all love that.
It doesn't get that simple.
Or just a pool. We don't need a whole aquatic center. Just
Or a pool.
No, we need the whole thing.
No, I just need a pool.
Thank you. Thank you very much for Cam especially for helping to coordinate our session today. We'll stay in touch. As LaDonna mentioned, we're staying close to when the document really will be released. We'll make sure to give you plenty of notice. We'll need to make sure we do all of the proper notification well in advance, so you'll know and we'll have time. But hopefully this was helpful for you to just kind of get this again on your radar and know the process, and then we'll continue to work with you. Again, all the meetings will be virtual. We'll make arrangements to make sure that we do an in-person meeting once the document is out so that we can walk you through it. It'll be here. We'll, again, have the USBs that you can plug into your computer and open it up. We'll have time. But it's a lot of information, and as you all have already mentioned, there's some things that you're concerned about, so you need to make sure that you're informed and that you weigh into the authority and express what your concerns are. That's the way it works. And we'll have plenty of time after the draft is released for the authority to respond to each and every comment. And then that'll take some time, and we'll come back out once that process is. I think it's about a year, we estimate, from draft to final. So again, it takes a little while to do these things, so we'll make sure that we walk in step with you to get there.
I do have one additional question. The new alignment, the preferred alignment, the elevations, are those going to be in the EIR, or is that something we can see now?
There are engineering drawings as part of the environmental document package.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we should wrap it up. Laura, you all, thank you. Serge, we're going to sign off from you. Thank you so